Besides news of peace talks failing with North and South Korea, the summer of 1951 was a happy one for Cleveland sports fans because of a baseball pitcher, Bob Feller, who's leading the Cleveland Indians on a winning streak. By August 21st, the Tribe Star became the sixth in American League to win 20 or more for the sixth season. Also in the local news, as primary elections for the mayor's office approached, Mayor Thomas A. Burke was criticized for corruption in the Cleveland Police Department, along with the active safety director, making shady deals with the city's racketeers and gamblers that operated in the city. On Friday, August 17, 1951, a local theatrical event called the Show Wagon was announced in the city newspapers. This annual event was scheduled to take place in a week at Halloran Park on August 24th. Halloran Park is situated between West 120th and West 117th Streets on the city's west side. The event was sponsored by the Cleveland's Recreation Department, along with one of the city newspapers, the Cleveland Press. This event consisted mainly of local amateur performers that followed a truck that had an 18-foot square stage equipped with an orchestra band shell. This attraction would visit up to 50 neighborhoods of Cleveland each summer, and Halloran Park was scheduled as the second last stop for the show wagon before finishing out the season at Berea Fairgrounds. Halloran Park was a place parents took their children to play during the day and a meeting destination for teenagers in the evening. However, the park was well known to authorities as an unsafe place for residents to be after dark due to the lack of illumination, which attracted vagrants and undesirables to gather and lay low. At 4 feet and 11 inches, 10-year-old Beverly Potts gave the appearance of being more mature than the other children on her street. Because of this, neighbors would ask her to watch their own children on Linnet Avenue. Beverly lived with her parents and older sister on Cleveland's west side, just off West 117th Street. The 10-year-old was considered a polite child who shied away from people she didn't know, especially men. Beverly had a passion for the performing arts, taking after her mother, who was a former dancer. Her father was a union stagehand in the city's theater district. Beverly was known to the adults in the neighborhood as the tall girl with the long, beautiful blonde pigtails. Coincidentally, a few weeks prior to the event at the park, the little girl's mother cut the child's long, thick hair to a medium length with bangs, so the fourth grader could wear her hair like the older girls in her neighborhood. Along with her being tall for her age, this haircut style would also contribute in giving Beverly Potts an appearance of being older than she actually was. Even though the 10-year-old was being grounded for staying out too late at Halloran Park the previous day, Beverly's mother allowed her daughter to attend the last summer event before the school began within a week. Not only was Beverly allowed to attend the park event with her friend who lived next door, but she also gave her daughter permission to stay until the show ended. Beverly's parents would regret making this particular decision for the rest of their lives. Ironically, on the day the show wagon was to set up on West 117th Street, the musical motion picture Showboat was playing up at the neighborhood theater around the corner. The talent show at Halloran Park was scheduled to begin their performances that evening near the park's pavilion. At 7 p.m., as many Clevelanders were gathering around their television sets to catch the next episode of Captain Video,
Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
The two girls were leaving their homes on their bikes for the neighborhood park. When they arrived, they were surprised to see a larger than expected audience of about 1,400 people. Finding it too difficult to maneuver through the crowds with their bicycles, the two girls decided at 7:45 p.m. to take their bicycles back home and return to the park on foot. After returning their bikes home, Beverly's parents watched from their front porch as the two girls walked back down the street and out of sight. However, unbeknownst to Beverly's mother, the girl accompanying her daughter was given a strict rule by her parents to be home at 9 o'clock. This arrangement would leave Beverly alone by herself at the park after dusk. By the time the two girls were back at the park maneuvering through the crowds to get a good view of the performers on stage, many residents were at home in front of their television sets watching their baseball team, the Cleveland Indians, battle it out with the New York Yankees at the downtown stadium. As the time neared 9 p.m., Beverly's friend decided she better start home.
9,
Planning on leaving the park with her friend, she was disappointed when Beverly blew her off by telling her she's allowed to stay until the end of the show. As she exited the park, the anguished child looked back one last time at Beverly, who was standing at the far end of the stage, totally engulfed with the musical performance. The last show performances ended at 9:30 p.m., much later than expected. Finally, the show wagon announcer proclaimed that was the end of the performances and killed the show lights, which engulfed the park in dark shadows and silhouettes. Some residents who lived on Liddett Avenue were able to hear the announcement of the show ending. Crowds began clearing out in sections as they exited the park. The neighborhood paper boy leaving the area on his bike believes he recognized Beverly's silhouette walking by herself with the first section of people who were walking diagonally across the park towards West 117th Street. By 10 p.m., Beverly's parents became concerned for their daughter's whereabouts and stepped outside to check the street. The large trees that lined both sides of Liddett Avenue obstructed most of the illumination coming from the few street lamps. This gave the street a sense of gloom once the sun went down. To the girl's family, the street looked empty and void of life. Believing that Beverly was still lingering around Halloran Park, the father and the eldest daughter decided to take a walk up to the street to get her. However, to their surprise, the show wagon was long gone and the park was dark and deserted. As panic began to set in, the two quickly began looking down neighborhood streets as they worked their way back home. After a half an hour of searching, they decided to contact the authorities for help. As neighbors on Liddett Avenue began tuning in to Night Owl Theater on their television sets, some began noticing patrol cars on the street in front of the Potts home. As a small crowd began forming outside, the police, along with concerned neighbors, began searching through the neighborhood for the missing child. The search continued into the early morning hours. The following day, detectives assigned to the case asked the child's parents and relatives to create a list of people they thought should be questioned. Witnesses that attended the show wagon event began coming forward to report seeing an intimidating, loud black coupe driven by a couple of young men circling the park. One terrified young girl told the detectives that an elderly man driving a green car slowly followed her down the street after leaving the park to go home. After 24 hours into the investigation, the police announced that they were looking for the drivers of the black coupe and a green 1948 automobile driven by a 50-year-old man who was seen around Halloran Park at the time of the show wagon. A photo of the missing 4 foot 11 inches 10-year-old was flashed across television screens, asking the public for assistance in finding the missing child. The railroad police at the New York Central Big 4-line railroads were asked to search boxcars parked in the city of Lindale, while others searched the railroad inner belt at Schaff Road in Brooklyn Heights. Planes were even used to search wooded areas and check open railroad cars from above.
What I remember is everybody, my parents were really concerned about us playing outside. They really kept an eye on us because everybody was worried that, why this girl was missing. They eventually felt somebody kidnapped her, and nobody really knew what happened to her. So, but this went on for quite a while, where people were really worried, what happened, because back at that time, things like that, kids were able to play outside. You could play in the parks, and nobody worried about. The neighbors looked out for one another, and there was it was something really was out of the normal for that time, in my life.
By the following Sunday, 3 days after the disappearance, 18 youngsters helped search behind Riverside Cemetery and behind the city's hospital near View Road, while police on horseback searched Lakewood Park. Deputies were ordered to round up all sex offenders in the vicinity of Halloran Park. One sex offender, who was arrested in 1949 for luring a little girl into his home with candy and molesting her, was interrogated. A 26-year-old sex offender who reportedly left his home abruptly on West 116th Street shortly after the disappearance of the girl, was arrested in Columbus, Ohio, and questioned. Nevertheless, many of these suspects either ended up passing lie detectors or had solid alibis. As onlookers, along with news reporters, crowded Linnet Avenue, neighbors tried consoling the family of the missing child with food and comforting words. The police ended up erecting barricades on Linden Avenue because of the traffic of curiosity seekers driving by the house gawking.
Because it got so much coverage in the newspapers, I think it was 9 days before the parents were able to get any sleep, before they were able to turn the lights off in their house. Between the phone calls and people knocking at the door, sightseers, do-gooders. All walking by the house. Oh, that's the house that Beverly Potts lived in, And, the parents were under suspicion for quite a while, and they went through, other than losing their daughter, they went through, and add on top of it, just going through hell with everybody. The questionings and people thinking that were involved in it in some way. They just went through hell. And it was just a terrible time for the family.
An expression of hopelessness could be seen on the mother's face while the sleep-deprived father smoked cigarette after cigarette. To reporters, even with the missing daughter's toys scattered around the Potts home, the house seemed empty of life. The Potts family had to eventually disconnect their phone in order to stop the crank callers from harassing them. Because of this, the crank calls found their way to the police department. A tip was called in from a New York Central engineer about seeing the missing 10-year-old hitchhiking with a 14-year-old boy on Brook Park and Tiedemann Road the following morning after the disappearance. This tip caused authorities to arrange to have the entire village of Brooklyn searched on horseback, along with 35 patrolmen from the police academy on foot. Mounted police officers decided to also search along the shores of Lake Erie, just west of West 65th Street, after receiving a tip that Beverly's abductor may have taken her there. On Monday, August 28th, a new lead was called into the police station that their young daughter attending the show wagon event saw Beverly as late as 10 p.m., a half hour later than originally reported. The child claimed she saw Beverly swinging on the door handle of a convertible parked on the park's lawn. The witness parents withheld the information at first because they did not want their family's vacation ruined by investigators. By the fourth day, Tuesday, August 28th, the mayor of Cleveland decided to make an announcement over several radio stations simultaneously, asking the public to help in finding the missing child by searching their backyards and vacant lots, including trash cans in their neighborhood. By the next day, detectives working the case were beginning to believe that the missing 10-year-old was no longer in the vicinity and began extending the search far beyond the boundaries of the city of Cleveland. Detectives sent out photographs of the missing child to police departments within a radius of 100 miles of the city and made sure every zone car in the city carried a photo of Beverly. By August 29th, the case of the missing child became the most aroused public response to date, causing a rate of 1,500 calls a day to authorities. As quickly as potential tips came in, a zone patrol car would be radioed to investigate. The Secretary of the Cleveland Federation of Labor started a campaign to raise reward money of $10,000 for information leading to the arrest of Beverly's abductor. Among the many positive tips that were phoned in, there were several crank calls claiming that the child was either dead or alive. Others were from astrologers and cultists wanting to involve themselves into the investigation. Nonetheless, as time went on, tips began tapering off and prank callers became more and more ghoulish. One false tip was called in to a neighbor of the Potts family claiming she was the missing girl and that she was waiting for her mother to come pick her up on the city's east side at East 13th Street and Chester Avenue.
Not only did the police put the parents through hell, in interrogating them, but they would get crack phone calls, that they have Beverly, and people just did weird things. They even had a guy that had somebody dress up like Beverly, and he called the parents and said, he has Beverly, and it just, a lot of people did a lot of weird things. It was just, the newspapers just splashed it all over the newspapers. And it was kind of a day and night thing that everything was Beverly Potts. People would come up with, I saw her here, or I saw her there. And none of it ever, and it just, between the media and the police searching for them, and there was a lot of crackpots that would join in the search, a lot of do-gooders that would join in, and it was just one big circus, one folly after another. It was terrible.
A blonde hair strand was found on a piece of gray blanket hanging from a low branch in an undeveloped section of Parma, Ohio, just south of Cleveland. After experts claimed that the hair was very similar to the missing child, along with the tip about the possibility of an accident victim being buried there, arrangements were made for the area to be thoroughly searched. This rural section is known to police as a hangout for teenage gangs to race their jalopies. The wooded section of the area is considered Lover's Lane. So on Wednesday, September 2nd, 30 auxiliary policemen, along with several Boy Scouts from Troop 221, were sent to search the 3/4 of a square mile wooded area between Stump Road, West 130th, Huffman, and Snow Road. Besides finding sections of the area littered with empty beer bottles and other items, a torn piece of pink clothing was found that closely resembled the same type of red sports shirt the missing child was wearing when she vanished. After a week of searching for the missing child and coming up with no clues, authorities, including the parents of the missing 10-year-old, began to accept that they will never see their child again. On August 31st, the lead detectives decided to release all suspects and start the investigation anew. Rethinking about the missing child's extreme shyness around strangers, investigators began to believe that the abductor must have been someone she knew. They even went as far as thinking that because the 10-year-old was specifically shy of males, that maybe a female was involved to lower the little girl's defenses. The chief of the Cleveland's Juvenile Bureau decided to question again the girl's family, including searching their home, along with Halloran Park, to see if anything was missed in the previous searches. Believing that kids at times confided in one another, other detectives arranged to question 400 classmates of Beverly from her school about her habits and personality. Teachers arrived early at the school to prepare a list of pupils from the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to be questioned. Investigators also began pondering the possibility that a neighbor on Beverly Street could have lured the child into their home under the false pretenses of offering her a babysitting job. Realizing that the majority of the garage floors in that neighborhood still had dirt floors, making it very easy to hide a body, police planned an unannounced door-to-door search on Lennon Avenue. But after the plan was leaked to the public, preventing a surprise search led the detectives to cancel the idea. For the family's sanity, the police stopped keeping the Potts family updated on every development in the case of their daughter, and would only contact them out of necessity and at night to avoid crowds. The detectives knew they could usually find someone up in the still hours of the night, no matter what hour. Also, because of the amount of crank letters, the investigators made arrangements to have the Potts family mail be directed to the Detective Bureau to be screened first.
Go ahead.
On September 3rd, A 12-year-old girl who was too afraid to come forward earlier claims she saw Beverly Potts at the show wagon that Friday, August 24th, with a tall, slender man. This perked the detective's attention because it matched earlier reports of the missing child seen standing at the side of an automobile parked at the south end of the playground, close to West 117th Street near the corner of Linnet Avenue. The Cleveland police also decided to search anything in the city big enough to hide a body. The illuminating, gas, telephone, and water departments were asked to help search all the underground public utilities within a 2-mile radius of Halloran Park. Again, on September 17th, 3 high-ranking police officers, including a female lieutenant officer, researched the Potts family house from top to bottom to make sure the previous investigators didn't miss anything. Basement windows were checked for dust to see if maybe the child is living somewhere in the neighborhood. On the 11th day into the investigation, the detectives began to show strain in the case. Even though the investigators still had 3 suspects in jail, they doubt their involvement. The best lead in the case was from the paper boy that was riding his bike from the park, who had seen Beverly walking alone towards the intersection of Linnet Avenue and West 117th Street. Then on September 9th, authorities, including the public, were shocked and angered after reading in the newspaper that there were 2 police officers at the show wagon in the park at the time Beverly Potts disappeared, and reported nothing unusual.
I can also vaguely remember there were 2 detectives that were working on the Beverly Potts case that also were bootleggers and sold illegal liquor. And there was a woman that owned a speakeasy over on the east side, and these cops, because she was cutting into their business, went to her and kind of tried to strong-arm her. Okay, she reported them to the authorities, and while they were trying to get money off of her, their superiors were listening outside the door and wound up arresting them and put them in jail. I think they were in jail for a couple of years. But these were the guys working on the Beverly Potts case. So everything was, to my knowledge, was just a comedy of errors from the beginning in trying to search for her. And, it's sad to say, actually, because of that, she was never found. No one knows what happened. There's more rumors. I think there's rumors to this day as what happened to Beverly Potts. And it seems everybody you talk to is an authority on it.
On September 15th at 9 a.m., more than 600 Boy Scouts were recruited to search at arm's length the vicinity between Halloran Park and Linnet Avenue. Another group was arranged to search between Tiedemann Road and Memphis Avenue in the city of Brooklyn, just southeast of Cleveland. While yet another group of boys investigated the area around West 150th Street and Purtis Road. The city's coroner, the famous Dr. Gerber, who worked on the infamous Cleveland torso murders back when Elliot Ness was the city's safety director, made arrangements to have circulars containing not only the missing girl's photo, but also her dental chart to be distributed to coroners throughout the nation.
Actually, at that time, you got to realize there was no DNA, no CSI. The police really, all they could do was go door to door, passing out pictures and pieces of clothing that they may have found someplace, just in vague attempts to see if anybody recognized anything. They were really at a loss because, like I said previously, it just wasn't something that happened back in that day.
After a 7-year-old girl was molested at Riverside Theater on October 2nd, angry parents met at George Washington Elementary School and demanded more protection for their children and voted to form a civic council in the West Park area. After learning that many child molesters find their victims in movie theaters, theater managers decided to reserve certain seats in theaters for children who arrive unescorted by their parents to help keep a watchful eye on them. The Coast Guard responded to a call from a man finding human hair while fishing in the Rocky River harbor. After dragging the bottom of the river with a grappling hook, they snagged some reddish clothing material resembling the same type of material the missing child was wearing for undergarments when she vanished. After the city's coroner determined that the hair was human, divers were sent to search the bottom of the harbor to see if a body was possibly wedged under some rocks. By October 11th, however, Dr. Gerber called off the underwater search. By October 21st, 2 months after the disappearance, dozens of men had been questioned in the Beverly investigation. On November 11th, with squirrel season approaching, authorities asked thousands of hunters to keep an eye out for evidence in the unexplored areas of the missing child. By this time, detectives believed that if the little girl was still alive, she would have communicated with her parents by now. A laundry truck driver was questioned by detectives after being arrested on the east side of the city. He was charged with kidnapping and molesting a 12-year-old girl after asking her for directions. Then on December 15th, a man was apprehended by detectives after he contacted a neighbor of the Potts family claiming that he had the missing child and that she had amnesia. The caller instructed the father to specifically dress his own daughter up to look like Beverly and meet him at a downtown department store, which at that time he would surrender the missing child over to them. Even though detectives found in his home that he shared with his mother and siblings newspaper clippings of unsolved assaults on young girls. The man had no previous record and no evidence was found connecting him with Beverly's disappearance. The deputy inspector working on the case of the missing girl was greatly disappointed when very few that attended the show wagon came forward with information. After the second week into the investigation, newsmen began writing the case off as another unexplained disappearance in history, while much of the public began losing interest in reading about the missing child. Even though Beverly Potts lived on Linden Avenue for over 10 years, it now seemed as if she never existed. It was as if the earth opened up and swallowed the child. This case was considered one of its kind in the Cleveland police history. It was unique at that time because despite the biggest manhunts and investigations, nothing had been learned of the child's fate.
Patrol post at 36-673-10-1.
As years passed, ones have come forward to either confess to the abduction of the little girl or having information about the disappearance. However, due to the lack of evidence, no one has ever been prosecuted for the crime. To date, the whereabouts of the child's remains have never been learned.
Yeah, they scoured, what I can remember is the police scoured the country trying to find, they went to different states looking for, crimes that were in any way familiar or similar to this, and what type of predators were in the area and so forth, and just they did everything they could to get a lead. Like I say, it was just for that time and that area, it's just something that never happened. It was devastating. So